Radical Radio Collective.
4ZZZ. Good afternoon, listeners. You are tuned into 4ZZZ on 102.1 FM, and this is Eco Radio, Australia's longest running peace and environment radio show, taking over your middle of the day in the middle of your week airwaves. We are at the end of the month at the moment, 27th. That means we're at the time of the year where everyone's Spotify playlist will be, not playlist, excuse me, the Spotify Wrapped will be coming out. So get excited for that. I am going to vow now that I will play some of it on next week's episode. We'll find out what that is. My name is Zach anyway, and my pronouns are he, they, and I want to start off by acknowledging and paying my respects to the custodians of the country on which we broadcast. We are located in the city Magangin on Turrbal Yagara Ugurpul land. I also want to acknowledge and pay my respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are listening in today. Our radio waves reach Kabi Kabi and Jinambara country in the north, Waka Waka country in the west. In the east, we pay our respects to the Quandamooka people, and down south we reach Commonberry, Nagaragwal, Mununjali, Wandjirabara and Yugambeh countries. There is no Crown land. On today's program, it's just going to be me hanging out in the studio for a bit, but I will be talking to Kelsey Taylor, who works at Watergum and is their invasive species officer, and we're going to be talking about the Great Cane Toad Bus that Watergum will be organising for next year. I'm also going to be talking about some of the little frogs that I found when I went for my little frogging walk on Friday night, if you saw it on the Eco Radio Instagram page, just because I think it's cool being able to talk about some of our local amphibians. And then I also want to touch upon some cane toad facts, I guess, because I think as like a very invasive species, they're kind of interesting. They get all this funding put towards it, obviously in terms of how we can reduce their impact in Australia, how we can remove them, but it also means we found out a lot of interesting things about them, and they're actually kind of cool in my opinion, aside from the whole destroying our ecosystem sort of thing. But yeah, that'll be it for today's program.
The Green Edge, Windsor's vegan mecca, is your one-stop grocer and cafe for all things plant-based and sustainably sourced. With a mouth-watering menu served daily and an extensive selection of pantry, home and lifestyle products, The Green Edge helps you make more ethical choices in daily life. Drop in or shop online at greenedgeonline.com.au. 4ZZZ subscribers receive a 5% discount on all cafe and grocery purchases. Proud stump discount outlets of 4ZZZ.
So with me, I have Kelsey Taylor from our good friends at Watergum. Kelsey is an invasive species officer and is the lead organiser of the Great Cane Toad Bus, which is scheduled to run again from the 18th to 26th of January 2025. How are you doing today, Kelsey?
Good, thanks. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're always thrilled to have folks from Watergum on at the time, because you guys do excellent work for the environment out in Springbrook. But to begin with, this question may be kind of obvious, but why is it important to remove cane toads from the ecosystem?
Yep, so cane toads have a few key impacts on our native ecosystems. The first off is that they're toxic, as many people know. So cane toads excrete a toxin called bufotoxin, which isn't native to any of Australia's flora or fauna. This means that our native wildlife wasn't able to evolve alongside bufotoxin, which makes it lethal to a large portion of our native wildlife.
Yeah.
Cane toads also have really high breeding rates, so a single female cane toad can produce up to 35,000 eggs each time she breeds, and she can breed around twice a year in southeast Queensland climates. And finally, cane toads have huge appetites. So they weren't able to consume the cane beetles that they were originally brought over to control, but they can eat just about anything else they can fit in their mouths. Insects make up a large portion of their diet, but they also consume native bird eggs, native frog eggs and native frog young, and even small mammals.
And can they potentially outcompete native frogs as well?
Yeah, so absolutely. So those breeding rates that I talked about, that's actually about 35 times higher rates of breeding than our native green tree frogs. So as you can see, they can absolutely outcompete them for habitat and resources.
Yeah, just completely dominate the ecosystem in terms of compared to other frogs at least. And
yes, exactly.
sort of you're touching upon their breeding rates being 35 times higher than that of our native tree frogs. But what about their biology makes them so difficult to remove from the ecosystem?
Yeah, so it definitely comes down to that breeding rate. So just the sheer amount of eggs that they're able to produce, and because they don't have any native predators, our native wildlife is slowly learning to consume cane toads, but they don't have any native predators here. And so those high number of eggs would be consumed or competed against in their native environments, but because they aren't able to be predated on in Australia, they have quite high survival rates compared to native frogs and other species, which just means that their population growth is so high and so difficult for us to control.
Yeah, they're certainly like a huge issue just everywhere we go. We were discussing before we went on air that I went frogging this Friday and there's just like 100 to 1 sort of cane toads compared to native frogs around, so really just highlights their prevalence within the ecosystem.
It's unfortunately a very common sight for those kinds of ratios in the wild.
Yeah, so I want to start moving towards how we can actually start removing cane toads from the ecosystem. And Water Gum is quite obviously being a great organisation to begin with, but they also hold the only commercial licence for the cane toad tadpole traps that were developed by the University of Queensland. Could you maybe tell us about how that works, how effective it is, and how people should be using it?
Yep, absolutely. So as you mentioned, this lure technology was developed by the University of Queensland. So some ecologists observed cane toad tadpoles consuming cane toad eggs in the wild, and it's believed that this behaviour is prevalent in much higher rates in Australia due to the intra-species competition. And so researchers were able to isolate the pheromone that was attracting the cane toad tadpoles to the cane toad eggs. And fortunately for us, this pheromone is also present in the glands of adult cane toads. So Water Gum is able to harvest the glands from adult cane toads and process this in our lab to produce a lure solution that we then pipette onto some tablets. Those are the lures used in the trap. And while these lures were being tested, Water Gum was part of an extensive citizen science project set up by the University of Queensland. And due to our ability to get such a wide number of community involved, and also our success with prototyping various trap designs, we were then granted the exclusive license for these lures. Water Gum then developed our trap and perfected it, and then we were able to start producing these commercially early last year. And so the way that this trap works is that the lure with the pheromone solution is placed inside the trap in a shallow water body near a cane toad tadpole swarm. The pheromone emits a scent plume into the water, which the cane toad tadpoles believe is a food source, so they'll follow that into the trap. Once they're in the trap, they're unable to get out. We recommend for people to use this in any water body with cane toad breeding activity, so whether that's ponds, dams, slow-flowing streams, or even large puddles. Place it in about 15 centimetres deep, set it for 4 to 8 hours with the lure inside, and let it do the work. It will remove up to 85% of a cane toad tadpole swarm when used in accordance with instructions.
That's fantastic. We always love those small scientific advancements that, compared to what the cane toad was introduced, where it was supposed to only predate on the cane beetle, and then 100 years later we've come up with a scientific solution that only targets cane toads. So kind of removing that initial, I guess, abrasion? Yeah, something along those lines. But are the traps available for individuals and organisations?
Yeah, absolutely. So the traps are available to purchase online at our Water Gum store, as well as in several stockists across the country. So you can find the traps by Googling Water Gum cane toad tadpole trap, and that will take you to our page where you can find an in-store stockist or go just directly to our online store. These are available for private use, and we also have bulk and not-for-profit discounts available for community organisations who are looking to use them on their regeneration projects or some other things like that.
Sweet. So I would assume for individuals at least, this would only be used by people who have water bodies on their private land. But for people that don't have those water bodies on their land, what is the best method for removing cane toads from the ecosystem?
Yep, so the best method for removing those cane toads would be toad busting, which is the manual removal of adult cane toads. So it's really easy to get involved with toad busting. All you need is a torch, a bucket, and some gloves or a pickup stick. Adult cane toads are active after dark, so head out once the sun's set with your torch. Cane toads rely on their toxins as their main defense mechanism, so shining a torch in their eyes will actually temporarily stun these toads, making them really easy to pick up from behind and place them into your bucket. We recommend using a tall bucket with a hole cut into the lid to prevent the toads from jumping back out, but you can use whatever containers you have lying around.
And then once you've caught these cane toads, how would you recommend ethically euthanizing the toads?
Yep, so Watergum endorses humane euthanasia. It's not the toads' fault that they're here. They were brought here by human error, and so it's our responsibility to deal with them as ethically as possible. And so the method that we recommend is called stepped hypothermia, or the fridge freezer technique. And this involves placing the toads in the fridge for 24 hours, which puts them into torpor, or kind of like froggy hibernation. This shuts off their pain receptors and allows them to then be placed into the freezer for another 24 hours for painless euthanasia. And Watergum also has a variety of drop-off points throughout southeast Queensland where you can take your live or frozen toads and they will deal with the humane euthanasia process for you. And Watergum collects all of these toads from our drop-off points for the production of the lures for the cane toad tadpole trap, allowing your toads to have an even greater environmental impact.
So now getting into the Great Cane Toad Bust of 2025, how important is it for the public to get involved with these kinds of projects, other than the removal of cane toads?
It's absolutely crucial for the public to get involved. So originally when cane toads were introduced in 1935, there was only 102 individuals brought to Australia. Now we have an estimated population of over 200 million cane toads in Australia, ranging from northern New South Wales all the way into northern WA. And these are areas and numbers that we just can't reach alone. So we're calling for people to get involved in their local areas and do as much as they can. Our motto is every cane toad counts. And as I've mentioned, with the really high breeding rates of cane toads, you can absolutely see this. And by getting involved in your local area, you're able to help create wildlife havens and help buy back habitat for native wildlife and native frogs.
So since 2019, the Great Cane Toad Bust has kind of been an annual event and has roughly removed about 1 million cane toads, both adults and tadpoles, from the environment. Kind of like, has this had like a noticeable impact on, first of all, toad numbers, but also has it managed to benefit native wildlife more as well?
Yep, so our message is never that we're going to completely eradicate cane toads from Australia, but about creating those wildlife havens and helping to slow the spread and allow native wildlife to adapt, and also for researchers to develop more scientific methods to help control the cane toads. However, in saying that, many of our dedicated toad busters have reported reductions in the cane toad populations in their local area following multiple years of regular toad busting and tadpole trapping. We're also getting reports from these toad busters that they're starting to see more native frog species and native wildlife coming into their backyards or local areas following their cane toad control efforts.
Yeah, that's very important to do. As like we were discussing earlier, native frogs, they're very much outcompeted with those cane toads. So ideally, if we remove even just like 50% of cane toads from the environment, that's going to have a huge impact on being able to get some of those native frogs back into the area, or native predators won't be predating on cane toads as much, which, greater benefits all round for the local environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And even studies have shown that a single cane toad bust can remove up to 47% of the cane toad population in a local area. So even if you only get involved during the Great Cane Toad Bust and do one big bust, it's going to have great impacts for your local area.
I think I even read online from one of the previous Great Cane Toad Bust that there was someone who they removed 4,000 cane toads, and this was a very much like anecdotal experience. Just seeing the number of native frogs that they managed to return to their property was profound.
Yeah, it's really great hearing all the community stories that we get. There are some really uplifting stories.
So in early 2025, Watergum will be hosting the Great Cane Toad Bust again. What are you hoping to achieve for this next edition?
So last year's event removed over 50,000 cane toads from the environment, and this year we're aiming for over 75,000 cane toads and tadpoles removed during the week of the Great Cane Toad Bust. We're also hoping to expand our impact right across Australia, all the way into Northern WA, Northern Territory and Northern New South Wales at the cane toad frontline, as well as continuing to grow our impact here in southeast Queensland.
And that'll be a huge thing, especially in northern WA, where we don't have those native animals who are yet adapted to dealing with the toads. So it just gives them a bit more of a lift and potentially being able to I guess, survive this incursion from the toads. So tomorrow there's actually a cane toad control webinar that will be hosted by Watergum, and it'll go through just talking about what cane toads are, how to remove them and so forth, and potentially, well, it will be getting people hyped up for the Great Cane Toad Bust of 2025. But what can people really expect from that?
Yeah, so as you've mentioned, we'll be starting the webinar with a brief overview of how cane toads came to Australia, how their populations have grown since, their impacts on Australia, as well as what you can do in your own home to help control these cane toad species, from tadpole trapping, toad busting, as well as preventative measures such as water body planting and fencing. And then we'll also be introducing our new citizen science project, which is running in the Gold Coast and is looking to assess on-ground impacts of toad busting on cane toad populations over a long period of time. So this study will be running over the next 4 years, and this is our first year running it, so we're really excited to get people involved in that. And we'll also be telling people how they can get involved in our toad bust, which will be running on the 5th of December.
Fantastic. And so where can people find out more and support next year's Great Cane Toad Bust, or how can they support Watergum in general, especially with this new citizen science event that is coming up?
Yep, so for any upcoming events, you can head over to the Watergum website. All our events are listed on our calendar there. To register for the Great Cane Toad Bust, you can just simply Google Watergum Great Cane Toad Bust, and it will take you directly to the event page where you can register and receive an information pack, which includes all the event information as well as an overview of how to get involved with tadpole trapping, toad busting, as well as a comprehensive cane toad adult and cane toad tadpole ID guide to help you know what you're looking for when you're out controlling them.
Perfect. And I'm thinking about for this upcoming Great Cane Toad Bust, Eco Radio will potentially be hosting its own Great Cane Toad Bust. Well, not its own Great Cane Toad Bust, but like a smaller event for us to all head out and get some toads. So do text in the station to let us know if you'd be interested in that. But thank you so much for taking your time taking the time out of your day to talk to us today, Kelsey.
The fact is, prescription glasses are a total hassle. We lose them, they break easily, and they cost way more than they need to. Dresden Vision are here to sort that out. They make their glasses right here in Australia, and they're built to last. Get prescription glasses from $100 and multifocals from $250. Check them out online at dresden.vision, proud sponsor of 4ZZZ.
And just for like a brief interlude, I want to talk about some frogs that I saw on Friday night. So I am like a fair bit of a night walker. I like going out looking for my creatures or my dudes. And so I went to Karawatha Forest. And after all this rain, it's been quite a nice spot for them at the moment. So what I was able to see was a thing called a major toadlet. They're not the most, I suppose, enigmatic frogs. They're not like our green tree frogs, but they are another species of frog that we can actually find here in Brisbane. And I do want to correct myself. If you saw on the Eco Radio Instagram page, I incorrectly labelled it as a copper-backed brood frog, when those are only found from Nerang to Mount Tamborine, or in that sort of area. So we're a bit too far north for that frog, but yeah. Just correcting that one now, it is a major toadlet. I was also able to see a common eastern froglet, I believe. I think that's what it was called. It was either that or a sign-bearing eastern froglet. Either way, again, another species of frog that we get here, or we get both species in Brisbane, but still nice being able to go out and see them. And I did see possibly the most ridiculous frogging experience I've ever had, where I was just walking along with my friend, and there was a native frog sitting on top of the head of a toad, and I thought that was pretty ridiculous because it's just such a predicament to be in. We got the double stacking of frogs. There's this Instagram page called Stacking Toads, and we found that naturally, which I think is pretty remarkable. But yeah, if you would like to hear more stories about how I go looking for frogs sometimes, do consider subscribing to 4ZZZ. There is a monthly gift this the monthly gift this month is a $200 gift card for Sock Drawer Heroes. They are a trans-affirming organisation, or gender-affirming organisation, I should say. And if you want to support 4ZZZ and support community radio in general, for the community, by the community, we are all volunteers here, and we all just like, I don't know, we all like being able to come on and talk and promote things that are happening within the community, and I think that's a really important thing at the end of the day, because I think we can all feel that slowly there's less and less of a sense of community around, and kind of like places like 4ZZZ act as a bit of a fight back against that. And if you want to subscribe, then you can head over to 4ZZZ.org.au/support. Subscribe for as little as $25 for a pet. Get your frog or whatever animal you may be keeping at home some nice merch. We'll make a 4ZZZ hat that's frog-sized, I'm sure, for it. But if you want to go the full way, you can subscribe for $500, and that one will get your name up in the studio, and you'll be remembered forever in 4ZZZ space at least, and we'll be very grateful. So you can also text in the studio at 0420-626-733. Let me know your thoughts on some frogs, or some of the frogs that you see around Brisbane, because I'm always keen to hear some of that. Before we kind of like continue on to the Bush Care Roundup and such, I want to touch upon cane toads in general, because unfortunately, since they are highly invasive, they are a species that we have managed to study a bit more than most, and we've learned a bunch of interesting things about them. So, like, aside from the fact that they're highly invasive, they're, like, kind of cool. So, to begin with, they're native to South America, pretty well known. That's pretty well known. But they actually can live 10 to 15 years in the wild and then 35 years in captivity, which, I don't know about you, but I always imagine cane toads do not live that long. At least not 35 years long, you know. And the scientific name, they have the scientific name Rhinella marina. Previously, this was Bufo marinus, I believe, but either way, the name suggests that they live in the sea, but they don't. And kind of like the idea of a cane toad and the ocean, my mind always goes back to this Morris Gleitzman book called Toad Rage, where one of the cane toads compared the ocean to that of a salt and vinegar chip. That's a book that a lot of Australian kids probably not today's Australian kids, but kids from like the 2000s would be familiar with. Surprisingly, though, they can actually tolerate conditions that are at least marginally salty. So they can like tolerate water that has a 15% similar to that of seawater, and then in one island in Panama, they were found to be able to live in water that was 27% on the way to becoming seawater. And for people that don't know, kind of like it's very rare you're able to find animals that can live in both salt and fresh water. Usually, kind of like even brackish water is a bit too it is a bit too uncomfortable for both. And that's because of this thing called osmoregulation, where it controls the level of salinity inside the body. So essentially, if you were to put a completely marine fish in fresh water, all of its water would kind of like rush into its cells, and it would blow up, almost like expand, just because it's got so much water in it it's got like such a high level of salinity in it compared to that of the environment surrounding it. And then if you were to put a freshwater fish in salt water, it would kind of like shrivel up and die. So cane toads in Australia have evolved like a bit differently to that compared to cane toads in South America and their native ranges. So the cane toads in Australia, their legs are actually getting longer progressively. So there was a scientific paper called The Rapid Expansion of the Cane Toad Invasion Front in Tropical Australia, and it was from 2000. and 7. And it found that some cane toads are able to travel 50 kilometers per year or 250 meters per night. And there was one specific toad that moved roughly 800 meters per night for 30 days. And this is the fastest rate of dispersal of any frog or toad species ever recorded. And comparing this back to between 1944 and 1974, it was estimated that cane toad dispersal was about 10 to 20 kilometers per year. So they've almost like tripled the rate of cane toad expansion in about a 40-year time period. And the reason why this is sort of happening is because their legs are getting longer. And how this happens is that if you've got this wave of cane toads that are slowly moving across Australia, the ones that have longer legs are obviously able to like hop more or move further in a single night, and then progressively like move further and further throughout the year in this invasion across Invasion West in Australia. And so then you get the cane toads that have longer legs breeding with one another, and so its offspring will the offspring of those two cane toads will have longer legs compared to that of cane toads that would have been they remained in a similar area on the east coast of Australia. And so you're seeing that multiple times across this invasion wave, and so you're getting the cane toads getting progressively longer and longer legs, essentially through some kind of natural selection. So if you compare the cane toads out west, compare it to the cane toads that we have here in Brisbane, it's pretty likely that the cane toads out west will have like significantly longer legs than those that we have in Brisbane, and this kind of like contributes to that expanding this increase in expansion rate compared to the cane toads between 1944 and 1974. They have those longer legs, they're able to hop further, and now they can hop over 60 kilometers per year, which is rather scary. And another interesting thing about cane toads in Australia is I mentioned this in my interview with Kelsey Taylor from I didn't mention it, she mentioned it. But tadpoles, cane toad tadpoles that is, in Australia are 30 times more likely to be interested in cannibalizing other cane toad tadpoles. And they're 2.6 times more likely to actually do it. And this is essentially a selection pressure from their own species to reduce the tadpole phase of their life cycle so they don't get eaten by other adult tadpoles. And as a result, we're actually seeing cane toads in Australia become like proper adult cane toads faster than that in South America, which is pretty interesting. And that's actually how they developed the cane toad tadpole trap at UQ. They use those pheromones that tadpole cane toads produce and think they're getting a bit of a meal to attract them, and then they get snatched up. So there have been a couple of interesting things, I guess, that to help native animals deal with cane toads, because cane toads do produce poison and none of our native animals are really resistant to it, so they just die, unfortunately. So in the Kimberley region, they've been using sausages containing toad meat and a poison that induces nausea to kind of like train native animals to not eat toads as it'll get them sick. The other thing is this is more of a natural kind of, I guess, way to prevent native animals from eating cane toads, is that young toads haven't had the time to develop that lethal poison that adult toads have, and so essentially native animals will eat these younger toads, get sick, and then learn that they can't eat the toads at all. So if they eat them during that juvenile stage, during that young adult stage, they're most likely to be fine, and then they learn not to eat them further. And we're starting to see some predators that have actually adapted to eating cane toads, but in ways that they don't get sick. So the Ricali, our native water rat, will eat the heart and other parts of the cane toad that are not poisonous in a way that's almost been described as like surgical precision. We've also got crows that will flip up the cane toad, then again eat around those poisoned glands. And the last one is our humble bin chicken, the ibis, which will essentially repeatedly dip cane toads, or like threaten to eat it, dip cane toads in water, that is, and this will get the cane toad to expel all of its poison, and it simply just washes them off in a creek, and then it's safe to eat for the ibis. So good for them. They're not so dumb is ye faithful bin chicken. So that will be it for my little talk about cane toads at the moment. We got a couple of texts in during the song break, but I got one from Wave who says, sorry Zach, did I miss a bit of who eats the eggs in tadpoles? Nice topic. So it's actually other cane toad tadpoles that eat the eggs and tadpoles of cane toads, and that's where we developed that the UQ cane toad tadpole trap from, is that the pheromone that those young cane toads produce, the young cane toad tadpoles produce, attracts other adult I say other adult cane toad tadpoles, but other larger tadpoles who think they're going to get a snack out of the smaller cane toad tadpoles, and then they just get whipped up with the little trap. And then we also got a text from Pete Davies who says the keelback snake, native to Queensland, also eats cane toads. He's not sure how it avoids poisoning, but it manages, and it's another reason for everyone to love and respect our snakes and not fear and kill them. And I agree with that 100%. I've never managed to see a keelback out in the wild, unfortunately, even though I know they are quite common. But it is pretty cool that they have not been hit hard by the introduction of cane toads, because other frog-eating species, like our local common death adder, has been hit really hard by the introduction of cane toads, and they get kind of wrecked by it, unfortunately. With that, though, it is time for our favourite segment of the program, and it is time for the Bush Care Roundup.
It's a Bush Care Roundup. They've been pulling out weeds, and then they put in trees. It's the Bush Care Roundup.
So on Thursday the 28th from 6 till 8 p.m, we have a cane toad control webinar and citizen science induction, and that one is an online event hosted by Watergum. Check that one out if you want to get into cane toad busting season. On Friday the 29th from 6 till 8, we have the Rally and March for Palestine, and that's at Queen's Gardens, Brisbane City. On Saturday the 30th from 7 till 9 p.m, we have the Mookinbar Working Bee from 106 Greencamp Road, Wakerley. From 9:30 till 11, we have the Nest Box Neighbours Building Backyard Habitats, and that one is at 88 to 118 Station Road, Bethania. And then from 11 till 3, we have the Nudgee Beach Citizen Science Wader Bird Day. That one is perfect for from grade 3 to grade 7-year-olds, from grade 3 to grade 7 kids, as I've been informed by the organiser, and that one is at 1588 Nudgee Road, Nudgee Beach. On Sunday the 1st, we have the Buranda Bush Care on Gladys Street, Stones Corner. That one is from 7 till 10 a.m. Then on Tuesday the 3rd, from 3:30 till 4:30, we have the Sea Slug Survey in the Rocky Shores, and that one is at John Laws Park, Burleigh Heads. On Wednesday the 4th, from 7:30 till 9:30, we have the Seas of Hope Community Planting. That one's at Point Cartwright Reserve, Butternut. And that is it for Eco Radio today. I love you all very much and would like to give you all forehead kisses.